Welcome to this explainer. So today we're diving into something truly fascinating, a deeply submerged ancient Syrian village that pretty much completely flips everything we thought we knew about human history. You know, the classic story we've all been taught, right? First humans hunted, then they figured out farming, and then finally they settled down to build complex societies. Well, actually, an incredible archaeological site, now completely hidden beneath a modern reservoir, proves that our ancestors were organizing, planning, and building massive public works way before they ever mastered the harvest. That is the story of Jerf el Ahmar. It's basically the true architectural cradle of civilization. To really wrap our heads around the mind-boggling age of this place, let's put it into perspective. Jerf el Ahmar was settled right around 9500 BCE. Think about that for a second. That means this thriving community along the banks of the Euphrates River actually predates the Great Pyramids of Giza and even the massive stones of Stonehenge by literally thousands upon thousands of years. We're talking about a community that was absolutely flourishing during the Neolithic period, representing that exact critical moment when humanity started making the monumental shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle into permanent rooted settlements.
Okay, Chapter 1, Racing the Rising Waters. Now, you might assume an ancient marvel like this was something archaeologists had been painstakingly uncovering for decades. But no, it was actually only discovered in 1989. So the scientific community literally just found out about it. Located on the left bank of the Euphrates in northern Syria, the team, led by the brilliant French archaeologist Daniel Storter, realized almost immediately that they had a massive ticking clock on their hands. They only had this incredibly brief, frantic window in the 1990s to excavate. Why? Because the entire area was slated to be permanently flooded by the construction of the Tishrin Dam. They were, quite literally, racing the rising waters.
As you can imagine, this was definitely not some leisurely Sunday afternoon dig. They started by excavating the surface, but quickly hit upon the staggering depth of what was hiding underneath. They found themselves frantically digging through multiple, stacked layers of continuous human occupation. It was like a giant puzzle. Village after village had been built right on top of the exact same location over centuries. Ultimately, the mission just became pure, desperate documentation. Working day and night, they tried to record every ounce of human innovation they could before the waters of what is now Lake Assad completely consumed the site. And when that dam was finally finished, Jerf el Ahmar disappeared beneath the waves forever. But thankfully, the data they rescued in that tiny window completely changed history.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, The Birth of Architecture. For the vast majority of early human history, homes were just simple, circular, nomadic-style dwellings. But at Jerf el Ahmar, we actually witness a revolutionary transition happening right before our eyes, the invention of rectangular buildings. Now, I know what you're thinking. A right angle doesn't exactly sound like a massive deal to us today, but back in 9500 BCE, it was an absolute technological leap. Rectangular buildings allowed these early humans to organize much larger rooms, build far more complex layouts, and create highly efficient, interconnected living spaces. It was, for all intents and purposes, the very birth of town planning. And they certainly didn't stop at just private homes. They were also building these massive communal buildings. These were partially underground structures that featured beautifully constructed stone benches running all along the walls, and even decorative stone slabs. I mean, really think about what that implies for a second. These spaces were clearly used for large community meetings, important rituals, or collective decision-making. The sheer precision and effort required to build these structures proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that these ancient people were perfectly capable of organizing massive public construction projects that required serious, sustained cooperation among dozens, maybe even hundreds of individuals. So, how did they pull it off? Let's look at Chapter 3, Dawn of the Harvest.
You have to wonder, how on earth do they sustain the massive workforce needed for these projects? Well, the environment nearly 12,000 years ago was actually quite a bit warmer than during the Ice Age, and it provided a super rich, diverse diet. You had gazelles roaming the plains, plenty of river fish, but the real game changer was their early experimentation with wild barley and inkhorn wheat. The people of Jerf el Ahmar didn't just forage for whatever they could find, they actually began managing these specific food resources. They were taking those very first super tentative steps toward agriculture, making them some of the absolute earliest known farmers in all of human history.
Now, the really fascinating part about this process is the massive domino effect it triggers. Step 1, early plant cultivation, leads directly into Step 2, food surpluses. For the very first time, humans actually had more calories available than they could consume in a single day. And that kind of predictability, it leads straight to Step 3, major population growth. Ultimately, having that dense population becomes the primary engine for step 4, the rise of massive complex civilizations, cities, and kingdoms. So the seeds of the entire modern world, our cities, our massive economies, they were quite literally planted by these early agricultural experiments along the Euphrates.
Let's tie it all together in Chapter 4, Rewriting Human History.
For decades, archaeology basically operated on one very stubborn old belief. We thought large-scale agriculture had to come first. The assumption was that only after we had massive food surpluses did humans have the free time to develop complex societies, build public buildings, and coordinate big labor projects. But the discovery at Jerf el Ahmar completely shattered that. It proved definitively that complex social coordination, communal planning, and monumental architecture actually existed well before full-scale agriculture was totally developed. These people were already organizing deeply complex villages while they were still heavily relying on hunting and gathering.
What it shows us is that civilization emerged gradually, driven by creativity and cooperation, not just some overnight agricultural revolution. The true foundations of society, learning to work together, holding large communal meetings, planning out village layouts, all of that was built on generations of teamwork and social innovation. The people of Jerf el Ahmar didn't just wake up one day, invent a farm, and then suddenly decide to build a town. No, they actually wanted to live together, share their ideas, and build community spaces first. And then, because they were living together, they had to figure out how to feed everyone through agricultural experimentation.
Today, the physical village of Jerf el Ahmar is completely gone from our sight, resting quietly at the muddy bottom of a reservoir. But its legacy fundamentally altered our entire understanding of who we are and exactly where we come from. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. As we wrap up and really consider this incredible legacy of cooperation and human ingenuity, I want to leave you with one final thought. If such a monumental, rule-breaking paradigm shift was hiding right there under the modern landscape of Syria, what other ancient secrets, what other completely lost chapters of human history are still out there right now, just waiting to be discovered?